Mayor Tory?
There we are. Sorry, I just had to
Wonderful.
unmute myself.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. I just need to.
Yeah. Yep. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just need to confirm with our staff person that we do have everyone here, and they're going to turn on the live stream to YouTube. So that'll take about 5 to 10 seconds, and then we can begin.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Good.
We all set to go then?
Mr. Mayor, yes, we're streaming now. You're good to go.
Thank you. Well, may I say good morning and apologize. It's me that kept the meeting from starting on time. I apologize. I was just I was on the phone doing something I had to do. But I would like to start by asking the clerk to confirm a quorum by calling the roll, if you would, please. Thank you.
Mayor Tory?
Present.
Present. Thank you. Councillor Gary Crawford?
Present.
Thank you. City Manager Chris Murray?
Present.
Thank you. And Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer Heather Taylor?
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, we have quorum.
Thank you. I will now then call meeting number 5 of the Debenture Committee to order. This meeting, of course, is being held remotely with members and staff calling in or connected by video conference. And so I would ask all of you, but also any members of the public or others who are journalists who are watching to have patience with delays or technical issues. It is possible for the public to view this meeting on YouTube, and I trust that anybody who wants to do that will be doing it. May I, notwithstanding that we are meeting remotely, that it is our tradition to acknowledge the land that we're meeting on is on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. And we acknowledge as well that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Before we proceed with our business, may I ask the members of the committee, are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? And if you do have an interest, please unmute your mic, and then we will ask you to state what the interest is, and there'll be a form to be filled out. Are there any interests to be declared? All right. Hearing none, may I have a motion to confirm the minutes of the Debenture Committee meeting of December 11th, 2019? Can I have that moved by Councillor Crawford?
Yep. So moved.
Thank you. All those in favor, if you could raise your hands. I think we can see everybody that are members of the committee. There's the motion moved by Councillor Crawford. All those in favor. And if I see there's Mr. Murray, Ms. Taylor, and myself, and Councillor Crawford moved it. That's carried. Thank you. So we have 3 items on the agenda. The first is an item to be received for information, but I think a very significant item, and I thank the staff for all the work they've done on it, which is the report from the Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer about the Toronto Social Debenture Program. And so I don't think we're going to have a presentation on it. The report is very thorough. And so what I would ask is that we move first to questions of staff. Are there any members of the committee that have questions for staff? And if so, I think you can just put your hand up, because I think I can see everybody, or unmute your mic and say so.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Crawford.
Just, and it'll be the same question for the second item. With regard to where we are at in this pandemic, how do you see the social debenture program moving forward? Sounds as if at the bottom it may have slightly lower interest rates, so there may be opportunities. So I'm just curious in the new state of affairs, how you see this program being laid out over the next number of years.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor, in actual fact, we know that through this pandemic, and we'll speak to it in a moment when we talk about the debenture that has been issued, we did go into the market with favorable conditions. There is money in the market, investors that are looking for safe places to invest during these turbulent times and during the market vulnerabilities. There is very much a demand for social bonds. we will be going out, as the report indicates, for a smaller amount, $100 million, relatively speaking, smaller for the city, to test the market. We will be the first municipality in Canada to try this, and we do expect that there is going to be exceptional demand and interest in our program, as well as just based on the market conditions right now and our experience with our debenture that we're here to speak to today, that there is going to be interest in this particular upcoming issuance. So the fact is that the social program is something that investors have been asking for. We know just even in 2019, globally, there was $65 billion of social bonds in the market. So we anticipate there's going to be significant interest.
And with regard to the $100 million and sort of, the bonds that we do every year, where will these social bonds or debentures fit in with our overall debt spending? $100 million is small compared to what we do, but I'm just getting a sense moving forward where you would see that.
As you know, we're authorized to issue $1 billion on an annual basis. It is going to be included into that overall count of $1 billion. So it's not taking us above our normal financing amount. It'll still keep within the overall financing amount, as well as our policy around interest carrying charges.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions, Mr. Mayor.
Recognizing the other members of the committee are Chris and Heather, are there any questions you have of each other? Otherwise, I just have a couple just following along with Gary, but do either of you have any questions? You can ask questions of yourself, although they'd be pretty good probably. Can I just ask this? In light of what the conversation we just had, I recognize there could be two reasons why we don't want to borrow more than 100 million or issue more than 100 million on this these social bonds. But on the assumption, and I haven't done the math as you have, that we have actually more than $100 million in eligible expenditures in the housing area and so forth, is the reason we're not borrowing or not issuing or proposing to issue more than 100 million because we're viewing it as a bit of a pilot project, or because we're somehow concerned that we actually don't have $100 million worth of projects in the current circumstance to finance with this? Because I would have thought, given everything that's in the report about the desirability of these bonds, the low cost of these, low interest cost, interest-bearing, coupon of these bonds, that we would be trying to do more, than 100 million.
And it's a great question. The issue is, as you know, when we finance on projects that are already completed. And when we look to finance, we also have to consider the age of the asset that we're financing and the repayment terms. And so there's several factors that are included in the overall decision. It is our first. We wanted to test the market, but we know that this is not just a pilot. This is something that we're going to be doing on an ongoing basis. So when we went in and looked at the projects that we knew there were social outcomes that we could speak to, which is an important part of the social bond financing program, we were confident in the pieces that we pulled together, specifically the shelters and George Street revitalization, that they were the ideal projects to do our inaugural social bond. But it's primarily because of the projects that we could bring together and speak to the social outcomes in a total amount that we could also amortize over a similar period of time.
So I'll just ask one more question, because we shouldn't belabor this. I mean, you obviously have the expertise to decide what's right, and I don't. I just ask these questions because I want to take advantage of a good opportunity. If I was to say, well, in addition to the ones you mentioned, George Street and so on, we could justify, for example, maybe a bad one, we're putting in, I think we've committed ourselves to putting in 160 million a year to Toronto community housing repairs, which seem to fit the social, context of this. And if I added to that the money we're putting in, certainly on an annual basis for affordable housing, you could take 100 million and make it 200 million. I'm oversimplifying this grossly, but if I was to say that and ask you to consider that, just in the context of saying, as we proceed forward, actually do this, am I wrong that those two things could be included within the context of a social bond? And the amounts of money, our money, we know we're spending right now, 160 million for TCHC is what's budgeted for next year and this year. Is that something that or do I have this wrong somehow?
No, you do have it right. The issue is that when we're looking at our amortization period, we're looking at bigger projects. Sometimes in the TCHC amounts of 160 million, there's regular repairs and maintenance that are capital of nature. We're looking for bigger components that we can actually speak to the very specific and direct social outcomes from that money. So it's not that it can't be included, it's just that we have very strong and compelling arguments when we pick very specific projects.
That affects the saleability of the bonds too, because we're able to say George Street is a big project. It's going to house all these people. It's going to have long-term care, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a more saleable proposition to a investor than it is to say we're having a hodgepodge of, little repairs across 150 buildings, that sort of thing.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Any questions from anybody? Well, then we can move to speakers. Are there people who are wishing to speak on this item? Just wave your hand. I can see everybody. No? Well, I will just speak briefly then and just say thank you to the staff for what is, I think, moving on something that I think others have moved on. And I think, again, we're going to be in the vanguard in this country. It was certainly admired when I was overseas on that fateful trip that I took that I think resulted in my being in quarantine for 2 weeks. But certainly our green finance initiatives were recognized by the rest of the world as being something where we were among North American cities in the lead. And I think we will be again with this. And I thank you for that. And I'll obviously want to entertain the discussion if we can possibly take advantage, just because these are so inexpensive, if we can take advantage of them by having anything else we can put in that we are doing this year. But otherwise, I'm certainly satisfied with the answers that I got today. So, and if there's nothing more to be said by anybody, then I will ask the clerk to read the recommendation aloud that is contained in the report, please.
We're just displaying the item. The recommendation is that the Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer recommends that the information provided by this report be received by the Debenture Committee.
May I have a motion to receive the staff recommendation moved by, now I see Chris sitting there looking like he needs some exercise. Chris, moved by Chris. All those in favor, please raise your hand. So we see votes in favor from everybody. Madam Clerk. All right, all those opposed, motion carries unanimously. The next item is item DB 5.2, authority to issue a debenture. This is a report again coming from the Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer. Are there any questions of staff on this item?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor. Again, similar to my other question about, and you mentioned that, Heather, about the market and where we are at right now, and our opportunities or not moving forward on issuing debt, and just your overview on that.
Okay, so thank you. As we all know, the market has been quite vulnerable for the last few months. Given the recent Bank of Canada announcements and their willingness to buy bonds in the market, it created an opportunity for us, or a window of opportunity for us, to test the market and go in. We actually took a different approach. We actually built our book in advance of actually issuing the debt, and we're able to say, because of that approach, we knew the interest in our bond prior to going to market. It was 2.5 times oversubscribed. So that demonstrated not only the opportunity in the market, but the confidence that the investors had in Toronto as a city. I would say that the market remains vulnerable. There's no question. We are watching the market. We are planning for additional issues probably over the next couple of months. Just again, we're in a fortunate position where we don't have to go in, and the investors know that. So we are watching, and we just talked about the sustainable bond, the social bond. That will probably be something that we entertain between now and the end of June, or that's our goal. So the interest rates are favorable. They will continue to likely be favorable for the remainder of the year, which makes our cost of borrowing, at its historical low levels. But we are confident that we will be able to continue to go into the market, take advantage of the situation in the sense of low interest rates, but with investor confidence and investor interest, in buying our bonds for the remainder of the year, so we can fulfill the goal of $1 billion by the end of the year. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I just want to get, you mentioned the window, and you're watching this window, but the sense I'm hearing is that it really is, we're fine for this year and chances beyond that, but it sounds as if it's more favorable than not over the next little while. Just want to make sure on that. Okay. I'm good, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Chris, any questions from you of the Chief Financial Officer or? No? Heather, Chief Financial Officer, I'll just ask you the usual questions I ask just to make sure that it's on the record that I asked, and I know it goes without saying that you're always looking and the report speaks to these matters. This is within the authorized, both within the authorized borrowing of the city and maintains in place the rolling ratio that we have with respect to our debt levels. Both of those are consistent with the City Council established policy.
So yes, I'll confirm to both of those questions. We are within our borrowing capacity, and the amounts have been built into our budget. If I may I just add one piece that I should have added to Councillor Crawford's question. This is an opening of an existing instrument, a $400 million instrument. This gets us to $600 million in total. What that does is some investors don't invest in bonds that have positions less than $500 million. We've never gone into the market with an instrument of over $500 million. So in actual fact, by doing this, it opens us up to another level of investors, another set of investors. It opens up the interest in Toronto, which we feel that we can demonstrate because of your questions that you just asked for. It's something that we can afford. It's something within our policies. It's within our budget that this particular instrument, in actual fact, gets us to a new level of investor exposure.
Could I assume, because I went through a lot of this when I was, borrowing on behalf of a company, that the good news that you reported with respect to the oversubscription and the level of interest and so on is a reflection of their confidence in Toronto, notwithstanding that we have our problems. They all know that has been publicly chronicled, and notwithstanding the problems of COVID-19, this took place in the middle of the pandemic, that because I presume you had discussions both with the underwriters, the National Bank and the others, and they in turn had discussions obviously with investors, that the response to this is a response that if you're looking for any good news in the middle of a period of somewhat consistent bad news, that this does reflect the confidence of the market. I'm not trying to get ourselves to pat ourselves in the back, but simply to look at the facts here, which is we were among the first to go out and do this, and we had a response that I guess you didn't know exactly what it would be, but it's pretty good, to say the least.
Yeah, there's no question that it's a demonstration of the investor confidence in Toronto and the fact that there's confidence in how we're managing the finances, especially during this particular pandemic. And, there were questions. There's absolutely been questions from the investors and by the banks, but we're able to, we're in talking to them on a daily basis, and they understand that everything is being very well managed. There's an enormous engine that you can appreciate, and that engine in our capital market staff, specifically Betsy and Randy, are doing a phenomenal job at keeping the confidence high with the banks and the investors.
And the final question is just to have you comment on something we haven't really focused on, although it's in the report, is the cost of borrowing and how that ranks relative to other issues we've done, and just to make sure that cost in dollar terms, the cost in percentage terms, I think you'll want to speak to, but also the cost in dollar terms for the current year is something that we have budgeted for.
That's correct. So as I mentioned earlier, the costs are budgeted for, but I am pleased to share the good news is the fact that the cost is lower than what we had budgeted. The cost is lower than we expected because of the historical low rates that the Bank of Canada has. Because of the interest in this instrument, we were actually able to tighten the spread of this particular instrument, but the total spread over Canada was 1.16%, which is, I think, the lowest it's ever been. The all-in cost was 1.69%, and we reopened an instrument that was at 2.65%. So that's a substantial reduction. That all being said, the costs are still in our budget, and we'll have a favorable variance when it comes to interest expense this year.
Well, we know where that's going, so you don't need to. That's fine. Any other questions of staff then? If not, we can move to speakers. Are there any speakers on this?
I'm fine.
Okay. I will just say thank you to our underwriters. I mean, they're people that are paid well for the work that they do, but I still appreciate nonetheless that they did a good job, because obviously, when you go out and get an issue that's 2.5 times subscribed, that's good work, and we appreciate that. But also in particular to the staff, and some of them I can see in front of me on the screen. But we have a crack team at this. I mean, we don't get a chance to say this often enough, because it's a kind of thing that gets less attention than might otherwise be the case, given how important it is. But this keeps us going with all the important projects we have to undertake. And I just want to say thank you very much to the staff. And I won't say for the benefit, I don't think we've ever yet had a journalist that attended one of these meetings, but for the benefit of the public who are watching, the fact is that I want to echo what Heather said, which is that we are trying, and we were doing really well under the leadership of Councillor Crawford and our Chief Financial Officer and the City Manager, to manage the city well. And our finances were in great shape, and still are at the core, but they were in great shape leading up to the pandemic. The pandemic has obviously caused a major disruption on an operating basis, but if you looked at the city's core, financial position, it continues to be responsibly managed and will continue to be responsibly managed. And I think that the market would not have subscribed at all to this issue had they felt otherwise. I mean, people out there buying these bonds or this debt are very responsible people who have other people's money that they're investing. And so I think it is a significant statement of confidence in the city and its future prospects, but also in its management. And that, of course, largely falls to the staff. So I want to say thank you for that as well, and to everybody that's been leading in that process. Anybody else want to say any words? Because if not, I'm prepared to ask the clerk again on this matter to read the recommendations aloud that authorizes the issuance of this debenture.
Okay, we'll display the item. The Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer recommends that 1. The Debenture Committee approve the provision of long-term financing of the capital projects listed in Attachment A through the issuance of a 10-year sinking fund debenture in the amount of $200 million in accordance with the terms and conditions set out in the purchase letter provided by the lead manager, National Bank Financial Inc., and entered into by the Mayor and the Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer, dated May 1st, 2020, the purchase letter, and as further described in this report. 2, authority be granted for the introduction of the necessary bill to the Debenture Committee to authorize the issuance of debentures. 3, the Debenture Committee authorize the appropriate City of Toronto officials to take the necessary actions to give effect thereto.
Thank you very much. May I have a motion to adopt the staff recommendations?
I'll move that.
Crawford, thank you. And we'll now call the roll on that. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. I see any opposed? The motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. The final item is item DB 5.3, the enactment of bylaws. I have a motion, members of the committee, to introduce and enact Bill 342, and I will ask the clerk to read my motion aloud, please.
That the Debenture Committee pass and declare as a bylaw Bill 342, prepared for the May 13, 2020 meeting of the Debenture Committee.
Thank you. May I ask again for a vote? All those in favor of the motion to enact a bylaw Bill 342? 1, 2, 3, 4. Any opposed? The motion is carried unanimously. Members, I also have a motion to introduce and enact the confirming bill, and I will ask the clerk to read my motion aloud, please.
Okay, we will display that for you. That the Debenture Committee pass and declare as a bylaw a confirmatory bill to confirm the legislative proceedings of the Debenture Committee acting under delegated authority at meeting 5 on May 6, 2020. May 13th, 2020.
Thank you very much. So, and you'll also correct, is it in the written material?
Correct.
Does it say that? Yes, thank you very much. May 13th, meeting 5, the Debenture Committee pass and declare as a bylaw, confirmatory bill. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Any opposed? The motion is carried unanimously. And just before adjourning, I will comment that the voting procedure by putting hands up on the screen was far superior to that experienced recently. No criticism intended of anybody at the recent City Council meeting. So we should take it that it works for 4. Why can't it work for 24? But nonetheless, may I say thank you again to the members of the committee and to the staff. And I think that concludes our business for today. Unless anybody has anything else, I will just declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you so much for all your hard work and for bringing us together today. And to the clerk's office for running the meeting on WebEx. Thank you very much.